Hey everyone, Mimir here. This is a continuation of a previous topic. If you haven't watched any parts before this, go check them out. And as always, thanks for listening. Hello and welcome back. We're going to be continuing our conversation of Harry Potter.
Heck yeah.
So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like the movies a little bit more. Also kind of bring up the Fantastic Beasts movies and everything too. I know they're not the greatest in my opinion, but what are your thoughts and feelings on the Fantastic Beasts movies?
Uh, I'm just gonna come out and just say it right at the start. They're the whole movie franchise is a shameless cash grab. Like it's like we want to cash in on Harry Potter some more. How do we do that? And then they're like, oh, Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. Let's do it. And there's all this stuff in it that don't get me wrong. There's stuff in it that I like and is cool, but there's other stuff where I'm just like, okay, like this is not. Well, I was gonna say I don't know another way to phrase it. It's like it doesn't have the magic. It doesn't have like the same feel to it as Harry Potter. Like that. I wasn't trying to make a pun there. I was just, but you know what I'm talking about. Where it
Yeah.
doesn't have like the same feel. Where it's like I'm immersed in these characters and their story. Like, and then it falls apart more. Actually, in the first movie, the guy who I really liked the most wasn't even the main character. It was his Muggle friend running behind him. What's his face? The guy who just wanted to open a bakery.
Yeah, I don't remember his name, but
It says a lot also that I don't, other than the main character whose name is like Newt Scamander, where I'm just like, what a name. Other than him, I literally remember nobody else from that movie.
yeah, like you said before, there are like parts about it that I really do like, but then there's not much to it in my opinion either. You know, it did feel kind of flat compared to Harry Potter.
The story just seemed to fall apart a little bit at some points. Like, it definitely showed more as it went on. But like the third movie came out, like one of the best descriptions of it was I think like a Screen Junkies rant where someone was like, yeah, so basically it's like we can't make plans, so the most random shit possible is going to happen, and we're just gonna have this hodgepodge of random bullshit going on, so that way the enemy can't predict our actions. And then it's just like great, and neither can the audience because this thing is all over the goddamn place. This story makes no sense.
I really only watched the first two. I didn't watch the Secrets of Dumbledore or whatever it was called. I don't know, like the first one I was kind of excited for, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can get into this. It's not too bad. We'll see where this goes. The second one, I was like, okay, like I'm kind of losing it here a little bit. And then by the time the second one ended, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to watch the third one, and I still haven't.
Yeah, just a lot of people weren't too enamored with it. I mean, it does have what you said before, like us getting a look at like different like wizarding worlds and stuff like that, like getting a good idea of like what it all looks like what American wizarding society looks like, and I was like, oh, surprisingly a little backwards, which is weird because usually it's the exact opposite. I don't know, but the Jude Law playing young Albus Dumbledore freaking killed me. Was it Jude Law? Am I remembering that actor's name right?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, playing young Dumbledore, and I was like, that's bait. They brought him in and then had him pose in a smart suit and vest to draw in fans, being like, oh, young Dumbledore. And again, this goes into the cash grab thing. They also had McGonagall show up too, and I remember thinking that was weird because I was like, wait a second, their ages shouldn't line up. And I checked it, and it's like, oh yeah, she was apparently not even supposed to be born for another decade by the time this is taking place, and so it's like, oh, okay. Or she's just like a very young child and shouldn't even be in school at this point, but all of a sudden here she is as a teenager, and it's like, oh, you absolutely did that just because you wanted to bait the fans into being like, look, we brought McGonagall in, you love her, right?
Yeah, I think Jude Law is a good actor.
Oh, he's excellent.
And like he did well in Sherlock Holmes and everything too. But yeah, I kind of seen some stuff for the third one, and I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't look terrible, but like, am I really interested in seeing it? And again, I just never got around to seeing it yet. So
Yeah, I saw parts of the third one. I don't know, it didn't film. I just wasn't attracted to it. Like I couldn't really bring myself to be motivated to watch it. Like I'm pretty sure I saw the second one. I remember most of the details. I can't remember if actually sitting down and watching it though. That's how memorable the movie was.
yeah,
But the first one I remember seeing like 2 or 3 times just because it was really popular for a while and everyone was watching it. I think I saw it over at a friend's place at one point, and then I just was like, oh, I'll watch it on my own, just see if I can enjoy it. And again, it struck me as a very mid story, or I was just like, yeah, it seems like you guys weren't really sure what you were doing. This like a lot of this is really not making sense, or there's like you go with jokes that aren't quite hitting or whatever. It's just I don't know. Like I there's criticism I can heap at it, stuff that didn't work for me but might work for other people. If you like that movie, I'm not saying your taste is trash. Like different strokes for different folks. But I wasn't really in love with it. Like I wasn't fascinated with it like I was with Harry Potter.
yeah, and I think part of it too is obviously gonna be like nostalgia. Like we grew up with Harry Potter, and it's the same thing with like when Star Wars happened, like the original trilogy. Everybody loved that, and then when um, the like episodes 1, 2, and 3 came out, people were kind of like, "Oh, well, this is crappy. This sucks." But that's the stuff that like came out around my time. So those are some of the ones that I really like. Obviously, I still prefer the original trilogy. I think it's just a great couple movies. And then, but I have that nostalgia for 1, 2, and 3. And then when 7, 8, and 9 came out, I kind of felt the same way that like the the originals came out, where they're like, oh no, we don't like 1, 2, and 3. Like we like our 4, 5, and 6. Like those are the originals. We love those. I felt the same way of like, no, I don't want to see 7, 8, and 9. Like I was excited for it. I did watch it, but it was also kind of like this isn't Star Wars.
Yeah, I get that vibe sometimes too, and I'm very particular about my Star Wars, and I will admit I've gone on some rants about them changing fundamental parts of the story and the themes and just shoving in characters that don't make sense and events that don't make sense, and I'm just like, you had better materials on hand ready to go. Why did you try and be original when all we asked was for you to adapt what we already know happened?
Yeah.
Like that. I mean that's a whole other rant we can save for the Star Wars talk. But yeah, no, I understand. I mean, even earlier on, I was even telling you that I prefer the original Dumbledore to the newer one. Michael Gambon is okay. I like him. I think he does a good job. He's a very talented actor, but I don't think he does as well as the original one from the first two films.
Yeah, I definitely am particular about like some of that stuff too, where it's like,
Richard
again,
Harris, that's the name.
yeah, like it is, like I said, more nostalgia. Like probably most out of anything. Um, but I don't know. Like I think there's a place for those movies, but it's not something that at least our generation is gonna be like super like hype about. It just is. It seems like that's more for the younger generation, which is fine. If they wanna, yeah, if they wanna have that like couple movies for their part of the like connection to that universe and everything, their like childhood for it, like fine, whatever. Um, just don't expect like all of us to hop on board and be like, yeah, these movies are amazing.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, like you said, does come down to nostalgia, but it's also like I don't know. I think that there is a quality issue also where it's like they're pushing different ideas or what they think a fandom should be like, and I mean that's true for a lot of older properties that like they try and do like a revive. Like I mean, HBO announced a while back that they want to do a Harry Potter series, like a rehash. Like I haven't heard too much of it. I've heard a lot of rumors floating around. They were talking at some point about doing like a remake, like just like for a mini series, and I was like, "Don't do that. That's a terrible idea." Uh, and I was just sorry. Go ahead.
The thing I heard about it is that they're gonna be doing like a series, um, with like each season is gonna be, I think, a book. So they're gonna do like the first season will be, um, like book number one. That's my understanding of it. I don't know how much of that is true. That's just one of the passing things that I heard about it. So it'll be like
Uh,
an entire season based off of the events of the first book.
it's very early still, so like a lot of this is just speculation. Like I wouldn't I don't trust a lot of the stuff that I hear this early on in production or just after the announcement came out because it's like how much is real. Like maybe there's one real version that leaked, or maybe it's all just speculation. But there's no way to know until we at least get closer to the actual release of this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean that sounds okay to me, but it's like they can't do it from like, or I don't think they'd be able to do it from like the main trio, like Harry, Hermione, and Ron. I think they'd have to like do it from like the perspective of like a background character or like another character just in the background, and bring attention to them and their adventure and like how they're seeing everything happening and just I mean you were mentioning before like what do these events look like for other characters.
Well,
And
I was sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and that's something that could be really worth exploring. Like you get someone who might have a unique perspective. You get an actor who could portray this character, and then just have at it. That's you got the recipe for a pretty good show.
I think the idea that was thrown out there, was that it was supposed to be like more in depth. It wasn't supposed to be, kind of like copying the movies. It's supposed to go from the book. So it's gonna be kind of, like the way I would see it is they're gonna talk about like, the events and everything. Like it's gonna show like the events of the book and everything, but it's not gonna be, as far as my understanding was, it wasn't going to be just following around Harry and his friends. It was going to be kind of like a Game of Thrones type thing where it was like, okay, well, this is happening over here, this is happening over here, this is happening over here, all at the same time. Or like, it wasn't going to be, just like follow Harry and his friends and this is the story. As far as I'm aware, that's what I heard, that it was supposed to be kind of like just an all-encompassing about the first book, the whole like first season.
I actually that might be okay. The way you were phrasing that a minute ago made me think like jumping to different characters' perspective, like in the books as they're happening. Though it made me think, being like, oh, does that mean we're going to see Draco get his ass handed to him on the train to and from school every year? Which happened several times in the books and was never portrayed in the movies, but I think would just be really funny. Like I think at one point after fifth year, like I think that there was like a line in the book about how Draco and two or three flunkies all tried to ambush them or tried to ambush Harry on the train, but then they did it right outside of a room where a bunch of members of Dumbledore's army were just hanging out, and so it's like it's like gang warfare where it's all of a sudden it's like you walked into the wrong compartment, motherfucker, and all of a sudden, like a bunch of guys from the rival gang jump out of the compartments, being like, "Nah, you walked into the wrong neighborhood," and then they just like curse the shit out of them, and I'm just like, that'd be hilarious to watch.
I mean, maybe like it seems like I said, it seems like it's supposed to be following like all of the events of the book instead of just focusing on like the trio like it did for the movies. Because in the movies, I mean, they're the main characters. It follows them, follows their storyline. Kind of everything's based around them, evolves around them. You don't see much else of like the other characters unless it's involving the main trio. So from my understanding, it's supposed to be like all the background stuff that happens, and kind of like maybe cut to, okay, what's this character doing now, or like cut to like these events that are happening behind the scenes of Harry and the trio. Or, well, not Harry and the trio, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So that's my understanding of what's like supposed to be happening. But again, like you said, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's like speculation. I don't know if that's like a true thing that was leaked or not. So we'll see.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of it's early speculation at this point. Like, there's no real telling. Like, until it gets closer at this point, I'm taking it all as just speculation. Like, even if like someone did get out like a brief description, or the idea was leaked from somebody, it's like you'll never be able to sort out what's true and what's not from just the cacophony of noise. Like, just like the all the people who just post stuff like they're theorizing about, but they're trying to pass it off as like, oh no, this is totally what they're gonna do. Like, it gets to a point where it's like, how do you tell what's real and what's not? So I'm gonna wait until it gets closer, until I start taking it seriously. But until then, at least it's fun to speculate.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of, kind of like the whole internet. I mean, everyone's got their own opinion on like what they think should happen and what they think is going to happen, and like sometimes in there you'll get like actual leaked stuff, but
That's the glory of the information age. Uh, yeah, the real quick though, I wanted to divert it back to like funny ideas and stuff that people have like funny stuff that people have pointed out about Harry Potter. There was something that I chuckle at occasionally, thinking about. Um, some other people have put other people have put this out before, talking about how like oh, how did it go? Oh yeah, like the first one being, oh, so George and Fred and George held on to the Marauders map, and this is gonna delve in definite spoiler territory. Fred and George held on to the Marauders map for years. There was a marker in their brother's bed that said Peter Pettigrew, and they never thought it was weird that there was another man in bed with their brother.
yeah.
Like they, for 3 years, you never, or for 2.5 years, you never thought it was weird that there was another man sleeping in the same bed as your brother. And people are just being like, "Hey, they don't snitch."
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the Marauders map too, there's a certain scene, I think you know where I'm going with this one, where it looks like two students are kind of hooking up in the hall or like hooking up like
Yeah,
in like a closet or something. Like,
that's hilarious. I love it.
yeah, and it's like that kind of brings to light like what are these teenagers doing, because you never see any like teenage pregnancy or anything like that like going on with these wizards. Like, you gotta think, like some of these teenagers are running around doing things they probably shouldn't.
If we're delving into that, I just want to say right now that first off, this is some dirty content, but this podcast is about to take a turn. But no, I agree with you 100%. Not to mention, you get all these young, like, there. Let's be real. There's minimal, proportional wise, like, or ratio wise, there's minimal adult supervision at Hogwarts. You're hanging out, like, as a kid, your exposure to a lot of stuff is going to come from other kids or like older teens, and so the question then becomes like, okay, they're influencing your thinking and your behavior for big chunks of the year. A lot of you are reaching a sort of like a sexual maturity at this point, like, like around like 15 or 16, say, like you start really committing yourself to, like, to observing the opposite gender, for example. um, at what point though is it like, okay, who gives these kids the sex ed talk? Because it
Right.
sounds like a lot of them are just gonna, experiment on their own, which on the one hand sounds super irresponsible, but on the other hand, it's like, oh well, magic. Like, I don't know, maybe Madame Pomfrey hands out birth control by the bucket. Like,
Yeah, I
we don't know, and that's a little bit creepy to think about because these are teenagers, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, they never discuss it enough that we think about it. Like, a lot of these kids have like modern sensibilities too. Like, even say that you're from some pureblood family or like some half blood family that's just super like super conservative, and they never talk about this stuff or whatever, which it happens. Like, there are people who have like, they don't talk about this sort of stuff in their household because the parents are awkward with their kids like that, and they don't want to discuss it, and they just trust the school to do it. The schools don't always do a good job, and in the case of Hogwarts, we never see them do a job. Period. Like we never see them even try.
But
So a
yeah,
lot that leaves a lot of people to speculate, like, oh, so are these kids just banging in the broom closets and put a put a pointed hat on the door to symbolize don't come in here? Like,
well, I mean,
what's
yeah,
going
like
on?
you have kids who are running around like getting themselves in trouble with trolls and like all this other stuff. Like you have to think that they're getting themselves in trouble with other things. Like you don't see like drug use or anything like that. Like obviously, like the wizarding drugs might be different and it might be okay, like, but like nobody's running around smoking pot. Nobody's running around like doing shrooms. No one's running around like smoking cigarettes or whatever. Nobody's drinking alcohol. Nobody is,
Well, the
like,
alcohol thing is.
well, yeah, but and like nobody's. You don't really see like the romances between them because let's face it, we all in high school we all had our crushes or our romances or whatever, and we did a lot of things we shouldn't have done, and you don't see any of that stuff like happening at Hogwarts, and it's like you have some kids who come from like the Muggle families and everything, so they're from the real world. They grew up in the real world, and magic is like brand new to them. Like Harry, he didn't know about any of this stuff. But and then that kind of brings into the conversation of like what happens if like a Muggle-born witch or wizard goes into Hogwarts and they're like, "Hey, did you hear about Hannah Montana?" Like I think that was like a meme that I seen or whatever, and it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, the like pure blood wizards and everything. They're like, no, like I don't know anything about that. Like pop culture references are lost on some of these kids because they didn't grow up in the like quote unquote real world that some of these
Yeah,
other kids did.
they have a totally skewed perception of the world because they exist in their own much smaller world, ironically enough. Like the wizarding world, like for how amazing it is also very small by comparison because only a small amount of people become wizards. Therefore your community can only be so big. That actually was going to be something I was going to mention before too, about how maybe like students do fool around at school or whatever, but that sort of thing is encouraged because like the ministry is maybe like, hey, wizards are one really bad war away from risking extinction. Maybe we should encourage teenage pregnancy and people hooking up and having as many kids as possible.
Yeah, I
Like
mean
that's
that'd
that
be pretty fucked, but
I mean, I know it is kind of fucked, but it's also like it's not the first time in history that a government, especially an old-fashioned government like the one in the Harry Potter universe with very old-fashioned ideals, might encourage young people to. It's like, hey, what would be great if you had kids right now? Go out and have kids. Like just have a bunch and have them contribute to the economy. Like have them get jobs, go to school. Like have them build the world that we live in, the community. Like long term, it'll work better for us if we have people to replace the ones we currently have. Like that's a like the flip side of that is also like the pureblood families. Like someone pointed out a while back, and I remember thinking this too, that it's really stupid of these families to be so arrogant about and like uppity about their pureblood status. When, as far as we're aware, most of them are within a century of being wiped out anyway. Like they are already at a point where it's like, oh, I you have to marry your cousin because she's the only one who can is like age appropriate for you and can continue the bloodline because everybody else is like dead or they're squibs or like they didn't have kids. And so it's a conversation that someone broke down where it's like from what we see from like just the Slytherin class in Harry's year, unless these kids have a bunch of siblings that were just never mentioned, or even just cases where it was like outright they said these are the only kids in this family. It's like a lot of these families are fairly close to going extinct because they just don't have enough kids to have enough kids to keep the bloodline going. Like for example, what is it? Sirius Black's family, for example. They had Sirius, they had his brother Regulus, and then they had Bellatrix, and then they had Narcissa, who became Mrs. Malfoy. It's like, okay, you married her off to another family, and she had one kid, Draco. And Bellatrix went to jail. Uh, Regulus got killed, and then Sirius Black never had kids. Probably also got really fucked up from his living conditions in Azkaban, which, just gonna throw that out there, by the way, Wizarding Prison is fucking dark. Like,
Yeah.
gulag. People who ran gulags in the USSR are looking at that being like, damn, man, lighten up. Like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
I mean, like, Harry's family, they only had Harry. I mean, it's pretty obvious, like, you know, what happened. But who knows? They could have had more kids afterwards. He could have had some siblings or something. Like, if, they would have stayed alive. But, and then Harry goes off and he has a couple kids of his own, which, that's great. But, like you said, a lot of these families, they do seem to only really have like one or two kids, and then not a whole lot happens with those kids afterwards. Like, how many of the kids Harry's age would have ended up with somebody else, and ended up having like kids of their own, and even some of them might not have magic. They might not ever have the ability to use magic.
Yeah. Part of it is like, I mean, even like the European nobility eventually caught on to the fact, like, hey, we're at a point where we're starting to marry our cousins. We need to introduce new blood into the royal bloodline. Otherwise, this is going to dry up pretty quick. I mean, the royal family now, for example, like, they married outside of the royal dynasties of Europe to, branch out the family a little bit, because it was starting to look like just one big trunk, and that's scary to look at.
Yeah. There was something else I was gonna bring up too. What was it? I'm sure I'll remember. You go ahead.
All right, I was gonna say, like, while you're thinking about that, there was some other ones I was gonna bring up. There was one very funny thing that I remember someone mentioning a while back. There's apparently a bit of throwaway filler in the first Harry Potter book where they're talking about, like, during the winter, apparently Fred and George enchanted snowballs to pelt the back of Professor Quirrell's turban. And then people are like, wait, they did what? And then it's like this little one sentence throwaway sentence that's just in the book, like a bit of flavor text. And then people are like, wait, so you mean Fred and George enchanted snowballs to hit Voldemort in the face? Because Quirrell at that point has Voldemort living under that turban. So,
Yeah.
so Voldemort was getting hit in the face and with snowballs, and Quirrell had to be like, "I'm sorry, I can't make them stop, Master." And he's just like, "Run, you fool, run! They're pelting me with snowballs. Get me the fuck out of here!"
Yeah.
The shit that man probably had to. I mean, don't get me wrong, Voldemort's like textbook scumbag. Like he's very much your stereotypical antagonist douchebag. But at the same time, it's funny just to imagine stuff from his perspective, where it's just like, why do I have to put up with this shit? This is terrible.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things I was gonna say was it's kind of really shitty how like the Ministry, when faced with all this evidence, they were just too afraid to like admit that Voldemort was back, that things were happening, that it was like there was an evil going on. They kept denying it because they didn't want it to be a reality. They didn't want to like have to face that fact of, maybe they need to do something about this. Maybe it'll cause a panic, like this could be terrible, and they just kind of really ignored all the signs until it was no longer able to be ignored, which I think was ridiculous, where it's like they just kept denying, no, that's not happening, and they didn't want to listen, or like he could have been stopped way sooner, which I mean wouldn't have made for a good story, but he could have been stopped way sooner if they just would have listened.
Right. That goes into talking about, like, I mean, like you said before, it's like a story has to happen.
Yeah.
And I've said before on this podcast, actually, I'm pretty sure I've said it's like, stories are much more interesting when your heroes and your villains all act smart. Like, when it's not just, oh, people are stupid and that's why things are allowed to happen. It's like, no, it's cool when, everyone is smart and acting intelligently, and, it's a battle of actual wills, and you're having to like struggle to come up with solutions to problems instead of just being like, you stupid bastard, why don't you just do this? And, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I've thought about that too. Where it's just, I mean, it goes into the whole idea of like government denial, where it's like they don't want to admit wrongdoing or whatever, and then eventually the lie gets so big that it's just like, well, now we can't admit we were wrong. I mean, how typical is that of like government incompetence, where it's just like we can't admit we're incompetent, like it just can't happen.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, and when it finally like gets forcefully revealed, there's like a big shakeup, and a bunch of people like are in serious trouble, and the prime minister or the minister of magic gets fired because people are like, you lied to us, you stupid bastard, and just all this crap going on. Um, yeah, no, I understand it's frustrating to like read in a certain context where it's just like, why aren't you being smarter, or why aren't you doing the thing better? But I honestly, to me, I think the Ministry of Magic is more interesting if it exists as like a sort of ass backwards government agency that's run mostly by nepotism, because we hear time and again how like the ministry is run by like a lot of pure blood families and half blood suck ups, and it's really hard for someone who's a muggle born to get a job there because they get treated like crap. Like Arthur Weasley is a pure blood, but he's fascinated with muggles, and so he works for the one department where he can do that, and people look down on him. And he even mentions how he's like, yeah, I got like one assistant and no one gives me enough funding, so it's really hard to do my job. But of course, they still rely on him to do stuff, because there was a scene, I think, in Prisoner of Azkaban. It wasn't in the movie; it was in the book, where some guy from the ministry sticks his head in the fire and is like, "Hey, yeah, we put out the press release with the Muggles, so they'll be on the lookout for Sirius Black 2. There's that thing that they said that they had. It's like a Muggle wand or whatever, like whatever." And Arthur Weasley's like, "You mean a gun?" And he's like, "Yeah, a gun. We told him that he has a gun, so hopefully they'll be extra careful." And I was just like, "Wow, man! Like you really need to invest more in people like Arthur who can tell you basic shit like this if you're not even going to learn it." Like if you literally don't know what a gun is, then it's like, how much are you missing out? Like, how do you talk to a normal person? And of course, the answer to that is you don't.
Well, yeah, like it's
Yeah,
it's so easy for us to recognize those things, but again, that goes into like, if you've never been introduced to that stuff, if you've never like had to deal with regular, like quote unquote regular life, because you've been in the wizarding world and everything's different, like of course you're not going to know what simple things are that everyone could recognize in our world, because for us it's obvious. But for
yeah,
them, it's like, oh well, I don't understand what this is because I've never been in contact with something like this.
yeah.
But
And and it reaches that point also where it's like this can only end badly at some point, where it's like wizards are missing out on so much. Eventually, they're just going to get caught. Like Ron doesn't know what an airplane is in 1990s England, and it's just like, man, like I kind of got a soft spot for Ron, even though a lot of people slam him a lot. Like that, I've read some of the theories out there about how Ron is just the worst, and I mean, they're fun to read, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, maybe people are being a little bit harsh on Ron, but at the same time, it's like Ron is probably a fairly decent example uh, like like what Wizarding Society does if you don't have exposure to things outside of it. Like Hermione and Harry have both lived outside of the Wizarding world, and so they understand more. But Ron not knowing like what an airplane is, or like I think at one point they even say like wizards don't know that like Muggles landed on the moon, and I'm just like, you guys are letting so much go by you that this is only going to end badly one day when you get taken completely by surprise by someone with like a fancy modified metal detector shows up outside of Hogwarts, and they're like, "What the hell is going on over here?"
yeah, well, I think they definitely, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they need to have like a Muggle studies like class.
They do
And
in
do
in
they?
Hogwarts.
Do they?
Yeah,
Well,
they
obviously they don't invest much into it.
They don't. They absolutely don't, and it's wild to me because I think Hermione was talking about it at one point in third year. So in the books, they were Hermione even mentioned it might have been a throwaway line in the movie. I can't remember, but there was a line about how Ron was looking at her schedule and was like, Hermione, why the hell are you taking Muggle studies? You're Muggle born. You know all this crap already. And she's like, yeah, but I like the extra curriculum grade. And I don't know. She's trying to justify it to them, and I'm just like, it's not like you're going to college, sweetheart. You don't need college credits. But she, the overachieving 13-year-old, whatever. But she mentions it, and I think at some point later, someone mentions something. It's again, this is treading into territory where it's like I'm not sure what's canon and what's fanon, where what's real and what's not. But as far as I'm aware, wizarding or Muggle studies at Hogwarts is extremely far behind. Like they barely touch on like what electricity is, and a lot of these kids apparently don't take the class like for very long. Like there's not even like a basic introductory course, and that leads to stuff that we see at like the World Cup where it's like people are wearing clothes that don't blend in at all with Muggle society. Again, in the book, there's a line about a guy who's wearing like a sundress, like a grown man with like big hairy arms and a beard, and he's wearing like a sundress. And some government worker is like, dude, you can't be wearing that around. You're gonna draw attention to yourself. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is perfectly acceptable Muggle clothing. I think you're just jealous. And then the government worker's like, no, dude, you're wearing women's clothing in public and everyone's gonna be looking at you. It's like, what is wrong with you? And he's like, nah, it's very breezy. I like the draft up my legs. And then it's just like, oh god, these people.
Yeah, I don't know. I like I said, I didn't know, like it could have been thrown in the movie quickly, and it just might have been something that I just don't remember very clearly. But
It would have been a throwaway line.
yeah, but another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is the naming scheme of like wizards and witches,
Oh
and
god.
it kind of goes into like more of your classical like D&D type of stuff. Like, what is a wizard? What is a witch? How do you classify the two? Well, in Hogwarts, the wizard is just like a male practitioner of magic, and a witch is a female. The way that like I think that's kind of wrong is that they're technically sorcerers. Like, yes and no, but like because okay, so a wizard I would see, like the Muggleborns as more along the lines of wizards, even though they do grow up with like the innate ability to cast magic. It's just they have to study and learn it better. And the way that like sorcerers are is they're born with the ability to cast magic. And they still have to kind of like study and refine it and everything. But like I don't know. I kind of have always had like that issue. It's the same thing when games and movies and stuff try and say dragon when it's clearly a wyvern.
Yeah, I know that
Like
really bugs you, and it's
yeah,
a sticking point with me too. But I know that really bugs you.
yeah. It's like no, that's not a dragon. That's not what a dragon is. It is technically like uh, I believe it would still be considered like a worm, like a wyrm.
Yes, a
But
subspecies of dragon.
yeah, but anyway, so witches and wizards and everything like that's another thing that kind of like bothers me. It's like I get it, I get why that's what you want to call them, but that's not correct, or at least not with the wide range of like definition there, because obviously you can call things whatever you want and whatever like work that you create. It's your own universe, but I kind of like to try and like stick to like one set of rules, and or at least one set of guidelines, I should say, not necessarily rules, and kind of like play it off of that. And again, I'll bring up Tolkien for an example. Like I think that using his work or works that are similar is like kind of a good jumping off reference point, because it was one of the like most prolific pieces of work that kind of like set the
Like,
tone for what fantasy is.
right.
And that's another thing though that kind of bothers me is Gandalf isn't a wizard.
Yeah.
And neither is Saruman. But anyway, we can get on that if we ever do like Lord of the Rings. But again, like I kind of like the idea of like having like a set rule of what is a witch, what is a wizard, what's a sorcerer, like all
the
that.
the, sta the standards change between different properties and fandoms and stuff like that, and I know that can be frustrating. Like I sometimes I'll read another like story or whatever as being like, oh, he's a witch, and then it's like the rules of being a witch there are completely different from being a witch in like Harry Potter, for example. Like Harry Potter wizards in a lot of ways are like super overpowered with how they're able to just spam magic like they do. Um, but then like you compare it to like other works or whatever, and then it's just like, oh, there's more set limits and magic can and can't do stuff like, magic in Harry Potter just straight up ignores the laws of thermodynamics at some points, and people are like, that's so overpowered. Like you could do anything with that level of power. And then in other fandoms, it's like, yeah, you're a wizard, but you still have to obey the laws of reality to a degree. Like you can bend them, but you can't break them.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like the way that I see like the definitions is like a witch. I I've heard some people try and describe a witch more along the lines of like almost like a druid, and it's like I don't think that's correct either. Like they're not more like a nature magic, um, but I see it as kind of like another branch of that, I guess. It's more of like the natural realm of magic. Not necessarily nature magic, but more of the natural realm. And a wizard is somebody who learns about like the ways to manipulate the natural world. Um,
That makes
not
sense to me.
somebody who like embraces the natural like laws and stuff of the universe. It's more of like how can I change the universe instead of like how can I manipulate or not manipulate, how can I like navigate through like the laws of the universe.
Yeah, it's like it's bending reality as opposed to changing reality.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I understand what you're getting at. It's different in how you inflict power on the world around you. Like, how does your power express itself, and how do you use it? Um, One thing that I thought was also pretty interesting about that also is people talk about Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and that bugged me when someone pointed this out to me. Where it's like, what's the difference? And I was like, what? And it's like, what's the difference between witchcraft and wizardry? Or like, do the girl magicals go to their own courses or whatever? And I'm like, I mean, I don't think they do. They never mention it, as far as I'm aware. They've never even said like, hey, Hermione's going off to witch classes. Harry and Ron, you're going off to wizard only classes. And it's like, oh, that's so it's the same thing. Why is it Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry?
Yeah,
And
it's almost like they separate the two as like two separate like classes of magic, even though they'll call the boys wizards and the girls witches. It's like, well, why are you? What's the difference here? If it's separated in the title, you know, but it's all really the same thing. Why is it, like you said, witchcraft and wizardry?
right, like I think they mentioned at some point that again, fandom and canon. Like I'm not sure what the distinction is, like or like where the line is with some of this shit. But like I think like some of the like Durmstrang, I think is supposed to be an all boys school at some point when they. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's book accurate or
Yeah,
lore accurate. Durmstrang is all boys, so maybe it's like, oh, Hogwarts accepts boys and girls for their into their courses,
yeah,
and maybe that's somehow special. And I'm like, okay, but you would have to teach all the magicals something. Like your population is already pretty low. You can't really afford to exclude half the population based on gender.
Well, I think the way I see it a little bit is there's probably a witches school, and then they have the wizard school, the wizarding school. And the way I see like Hogwarts is a co-ed, so that's probably why they call it witchcraft and wizardry, because it's a co-ed school. But maybe Hogwarts is more a quote unquote like public school, like in that sense, or at least a co-ed private school, and then you have like your more traditional private schools where it's like all one gender. Like there's boys in this school and there's girls in this school. So maybe they separate it as like this is the um, I don't know the names, I can't remember, but the whatever school of wizardry or the whatever school of witches or witchcraft. And then it
Right.
just so happens that Hogwarts is a co-ed school, so yeah.
Because I remember Beauxbaton, the French school. I know that they emphasized that the girls were all very pretty from there, um, and I remember thinking it's like, is it the all girl school? But then again, like I've gotten so freaking immersed into reading like fan fiction and stuff too. Like I don't know if Beauxbaton is the all girl school. I just remember that Durmstrang is the all boys school.
Well, yeah,
So I'm not.
there's the all girls school that has like they're like French girls.
Yeah,
Um,
Beauxbaton, that's the one.
yeah,
It's the French school, which is cool in concept, I guess. Like people have talked about it and like in stories, like what it would be like to have a magical school in southern France and like what sort of aesthetic it would probably have. And it's like what if you turned the Louvre, the big art museum in Paris into a school, and it's like, oh, that'd probably be really cool to look at, and like
yeah,
probably have like these really extensive gardens and stuff too, because that's a popular thing and the climate's good for it. So it's like they probably have much more. I think Fleur Delacour, like her character, is talking about it at some point too, where she mentions how like and people latched onto it, where it's just like, oh yeah, Beauxbaton has like this huge ground, like the grounds are a bit bigger than Hogwarts, and they're covered in gardens and like walkways and fountains and stuff, and people are like, oh, you could probably have a hell of a cool garden with magic at your disposal.
yeah. And I think that having like an all girls like witchcraft school, like I think that definitely, especially if it's in France, like I think that's got to be like one of the more beautiful looking schools. It's got to be very elegant, very beautiful, like aesthetic wise. And I think I'm just gonna call them the like Cossacks because that's kind of the vibe that they give. I think that's kind of like one of the representations that they throw off.
The fur hat, yeah, with the backward fashion of and aesthetics that they have in the wizarding world, yeah, they kind of do look like Cossacks.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say that for them. I feel like theirs would be definitely more of like old old Russian style. Like it's probably these big grand like rooms and everything, kind of like um the what is it, the main hall or whatever in Hogwarts, how it's like it's
The Great
very,
Hall.
yeah, it's very European style where it's like castles and everything. But then I feel like if you have like the other school, and again, I don't remember the names of all these other fucking schools. But
It's okay. You only watch the movies. I get it.
yeah, so I think theirs have got to be like the big grand halls have got to be like these big open spaces with like maybe some very like dark lighting, where it's, I don't know, this is kind of the vibe that they give off is like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a lot of like old, Russian style buildings or Cossack buildings, whatever, however the fuck you want
Oh
to call
yeah.
them. Like
Like,
it.
but before a bunch of them got destroyed, yeah, like examples of like architecture from Eastern Europe, yeah, like and like it has its own style to it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, like, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of like bright, friendly looking buildings, everything like that too within that culture, as far as I know. Like, some of the things I've seen, like some of the art and architecture for that, it doesn't look like dingy and dark and like quote unquote manly. Um,
Oh yeah, like Prague is, I think, is discussed as being one of the most beautiful cities in all the world. Frequently, when people discuss like what's a beautiful place to live, I think Prague is usually in like the top 10 like listed places. Like if they're being international about it, like it's usually like, oh yeah, Prague's beautiful. Like even people who are like don't much care for that climate or that part of the world, they're just like, oh no, Prague's beautiful. Like the architecture's gorgeous, the artwork's good, the people are friendly. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, so I think the students themselves kind of give off that like, very like almost like militarized like style. So I feel like that's kind of like how their school is. Their school is probably very like, uh like
Discipline oriented
yes,
and like
yes, that's the word I
strict
was looking
and
for.
yeah,
Disciplined. Because
yeah.
you see Hogwarts and it's pretty free and willy nilly, like they're running around kind of doing whatever the hell they want. And then you look at the all girls school, and it seems like it's also very like disciplined, but in a more like elegant fashion. Like
It
it's
comes off as like charm school.
yeah, it's they're very like uh, well behaved and kind of like not because there's a difference between like the elegance and the militarized, but they're both disciplined to the same like respect. Like they're both like these are well behaved kids who they probably don't get into too much trouble. But then you have uh, Hogwarts where everyone is literally just kind of running around doing whatever the fuck they want.
Yep. They talk about it at one point. I think this also came up in the books. It's a deleted scene also in the movie where it's like after the Bobaton girls all come in and like they do that whole like that little sighing like sort of thing,
Yeah.
uh, and which it's very weird to describe. It's just like they're walking forward, then like they'll curtsy and then the Durmstrang students come in. They've got like their staves, like shooting sparks, and then you got like some dudes who like charge forward and then do like a little breakdance motion, and then blow a fire dragon out of like his mouth or whatever. And
Yeah.
then the Hogwarts demonstration for school pride is they sing the school song,
Yeah.
but they do it in the way that they did in the books, which is like basically Dumbledore's just like everybody pick your favorite tune and say the words to that tune. There's literally no way you can get this wrong unless as long as you're just saying the words. And like the joke, and I think in like one of the books was that like Fred and George were like singing it like a funeral dirge, and so like they were taking much longer to finish it than everybody else. I can only imagine that like the pure blood and half blood kids were all singing like the same like general song from the Wizarding World, but then like some Muggle-born student shows up and he's trying to sing it like he's Freddie Mercury or Michael Jackson, and everyone's looking at him like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
Meanwhile, his Muggle-born friends think he's the coolest guy ever because he's going hee hee in between each of the lines. And he's moonwalking back and forth, and people are like, "Whoa, what magic?" Yeah, I'm sort of jumping back into our thing. It's like Muggle-born students must have like their own wild-looking culture compared to like all the Wizarding-born students. Like imagine them seeing like some Muggle-born student moonwalk and being like, "What magic is that? What spell is that?"
Yeah, there's definitely like a separation of culture there where like Muggle-borns versus purebloods, which I get is gonna be a thing. But yeah, I think that about wraps up for our stream today.
Oh yeah,
Again,
we're starting. Yeah, capping on time here.
yeah, again, check out the YouTube channel. That's where these are gonna be posted. If you're watching on YouTube, hi YouTube, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. We really
Yeah.
enjoy like when you guys want to leave comments, so go ahead and leave some comments to talk about your favorite parts of Harry Potter. Talk about maybe your favorite parts of the games or anything. Kind of whatever floats your goat.
Floats the goat, huh? That we're going with.
Yeah, you never heard that before? All right, well maybe just
Uh,
me.
I think that's just you.
No, it was definitely something that me and my friends knew about. I'll send you a meme after this. But check
Mimir and his friends all thought they were cool guys. Feel bad for them.
check out the merch store. We got a lot of really nice stuff there. Like I said before, and like Lennox said, a lot of our stuff on there has the things that we've gotten anyway has come out, and it's a pretty good quality, pretty nice stuff. Let us know if you guys have any other suggestions of video ideas. Yeah, am I missing anything?
I think you got most of it. Honestly, I think we should probably end up revisiting Harry Potter at some point in the future, just because there's a bunch of memes that I'm only just thinking of that I really want to bring up. But I know we're capping it off here. But yeah, no, check out that merch store. I got myself a little notebook to write stuff in for our podcast to remind me of like our schedule and stuff. It's the Book of Salt notebook. So that's a nice little unique piece of merch that I carry around with me. Just the Book of Salt, and then just all the stuff I'll say to Mimir about how he it's like we're doing this topic next, or it's like I gotta perform well or whatever. Otherwise, he'll kick me off the podcast.
Yeah, well, I got a couple of really cool ideas I want to throw your way too, so I'll probably get with you on that. But again, if you guys have any episode ideas or you want us to revisit any topics, let us know. And as always, I want to thank you guys for watching.
Thanks, guys.